The Final Insult Ambassador. Elena Vasquez walked through the crystal corridors of Nexus Station with the same calm dignity she had maintained for the past 15 years. Her black hair was streaked with silver now, and the lines around her dark eyes spoke of countless negotiations, mediations, and diplomatic victories that had kept the galaxy at peace. Today, however, would be different. Today would be her last day representing Earth in the Galactic Trade Federation. The massive station rotated slowly in the void between star systems, serving as neutral ground for the galaxy's most important decisions. Its crystalline walls refracted the light of distant stars into dancing rainbows that had once filled Elena with wonder. Now they seemed to mock her with their beauty, knowing what was about to unfold in the great assembly hall. Dr. Marcus Chen fell into step beside her, his tablet displaying the final reports that had driven them to this moment. The human xenobiologist had spent 20 years studying alien cultures, learning their customs, understanding their fears and motivations better than they understood themselves. His expertise had prevented 17 wars and saved countless lives. None of that seemed to matter anymore. The Zephyrian Council has made their decision official, Marcus said quietly, his voice echoing slightly in the empty corridor. Humanity has been reclassified as a junior species, effective immediately. Our voting rights in the Federation are suspended, our trade agreements are void, our diplomatic immunity has been revoked. Elena stopped walking and turned to face the observation deck. Through the transparent aluminum, she could see the vast fleet of ships surrounding Nexus Station, sleek Altrurian vessels with their bio-organic hulls, massive Gorvani cargo haulers built like floating mountains, elegant Zephyrian cruisers that looked more like works of art than warships, and scattered among them, small and practical, were the human ships that had carried diplomats, engineers, doctors, and teachers across the galaxy for over a century. 150 years, Elena said softly. That's how long humans have been members of this federation. We've mediated disputes between species that couldn't even communicate with each other. We've shared our medical knowledge freely, saving entire worlds from plagues. We've built the translation systems that allow all these different species to work together. And now they call us primitives who need to be managed like children. Marcus pulled up another file on his tablet. The official statement from High Regent Thylus says that humanity's limited lifespan and emotional decision-making processes make us unsuitable for full membership in a civilization of long-lived logical species. He recommends we be grateful for the opportunity to serve our betters in a more appropriate capacity. Elena's jaw tightened. She had negotiated with Thylus before. The Zephyrian leader was centuries old, his crystalline body containing a mind that processed information at incredible speeds. Like most of his species, he believed that intelligence could be measured purely by computational ability and lifespan. The fact that humans lived only a century and made decisions based on emotion as much as logic made them inferior in his view. Commander Okafor's report? Elena asked. The exodus is proceeding on schedule, Marcus replied. All human personnel have been evacuated from non-essential positions. Our trade ships are pulling out of Altrurian space. The medical research stations are being abandoned. The defense coordination centers are being shut down. In 72 hours, there won't be a single human in Federation space except for our diplomatic mission. And after today, not even that. They continued walking toward the great assembly hall. The corridors were busier now, filled with aliens from dozens of species heading to witness what they believed would be humanity's formal acceptance of their new status. Elena could hear the excited chatter in multiple languages. The universal translators, designed and built by human engineers, converted everything into the common tongue that humans had helped establish 2 centuries ago. The Gorvani delegates moved like living boulders, their stone-like skin clicking against the floor with each step. They were ancient even by galactic standards, some individuals living for thousands of years. To them, humans were barely more than mayflies, existing for such a brief time that their thoughts and feelings hardly mattered. A group of Altrurian scientists floated past, their energy-based forms shimmering with excitement. They had benefited enormously from human research, particularly in the field of medicine. Human doctors had an unusual talent for treating ailments across species barriers, seeing patterns that eluded even the most advanced alien physicians. But gratitude was apparently a short-lived emotion for beings who measured time in geological ages. The Vorthak military attachés moved in perfect formation, their insectoid bodies gleaming under the station's lights. They respected strength above all else, and while they acknowledged human courage in battle, they had never understood how such physically weak creatures could consistently outmaneuver larger, stronger opponents. To them, the reclassification simply reflected reality. Elena paused outside the assembly hall doors. Through the transparent barriers, she could see the massive amphitheater beyond. Thousands of seats arranged in species-specific configurations surrounded a central platform where she would make her final address. The sight brought back memories of her first day here as a junior diplomat, full of hope for the future of galactic civilization. "Any final messages from Earth?" she asked. Marcus nodded grimly. President Wright's response was brief. "Proceed as planned. Bring our people home." The Security Council has authorized the complete withdrawal of all human assets from Federation space. All research sharing agreements are terminated. All defense pacts are void. All humanitarian aid programs are ending. And the aliens still think we're bluffing. High Regent Thylus told the Assembly yesterday that humans are too dependent on galactic trade to actually leave. He expects us to accept the reclassification and be grateful for whatever scraps they throw us. Elena smiled for the first time that day, though there was no humor in it. He's about to learn something about human nature that apparently wasn't covered in his cultural studies. The doors to the assembly hall opened automatically, recognizing her diplomatic credentials. The sound of thousands of voices hit her like a wave. The vast chamber stretched out before her, its domed ceiling showing a real-time view of the stars outside. Each species had its own section, with environmental controls adjusted for their specific needs. The aquatic therians floated in specially designed water pods. The energy-based Lumarians existed as controlled plasma fields. The silicon-based Croxy sat on heated platforms that kept their rocky bodies at optimal temperature. At the center of it all was the speaking platform, a raised circle surrounded by recording devices that would broadcast her words across the galaxy. Elena had stood there many times before, usually to help resolve some crisis that threatened galactic peace. Today, she would stand there one last time to announce the end of humanity's involvement in galactic affairs. High Regent Thylus occupied the most prominent position in the chamber, his crystalline form towering above the other delegates. His body refracted the chamber's lights into spectacular patterns, a display that never failed to impress other species. As Elena entered, his faceted head turned toward her with what she had learned to recognize as amusement. "Ah, Ambassador Vasquez!" His voice resonated through the chamber's speakers, translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. "We are pleased that humanity has accepted the wisdom of the Council's decision. Your new role as junior species will allow your people to contribute to galactic civilization in ways more suited to your capabilities." The chamber fell silent as Elena walked to the speaking platform. Every eye, sensor, and perceptual organ in the vast hall focused on her. She had prepared for this moment for weeks, crafting her words carefully. She wanted to be clear, dignified, and absolutely final. Elena activated the platform's recording systems and began to speak. Her voice carried clearly throughout the chamber, the human-designed acoustics ensuring that every word reached its intended audience. "Honored delegates of the Galactic Trade Federation," she began, her tone formal but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "I stand before you today not to accept your generous offer of junior species status, but to formally announce humanity's complete withdrawal from this organization." A ripple of confusion swept through the chamber. This was not what they had expected to hear. For 150 years, humanity has been a proud member of this federation. We have shared our knowledge freely, mediated your disputes honestly, and bled alongside you in defense of our common values. We have asked for nothing more than the respect due to any sentient species and the right to participate as equals in the great work of galactic civilization. Elena paused, letting her words sink in. High Regent Thylus had gone very still, his crystalline body no longer refracting light in playful patterns. "Today, you have made it clear that you view humanity not as partners, but as servants. Not as equals, but as inferiors to be managed and controlled. You have forgotten that respect is not something that can be demanded. It must be earned through one's actions and given freely by one's peers." She gestured to the vast assembly around her. "Look around this chamber. See the translation systems that allow you to understand each other, designed by human engineers. Consider the medical treatments that have saved billions of lives across the galaxy, developed by human doctors. Think about the conflicts that have been resolved peacefully through mediation, guided by human diplomats who understood that compromise requires wisdom, not just computational power." The silence in the chamber was complete now. Elena had their full attention. "You have decided that these contributions are not enough to merit equal treatment. Very well. As of this moment, humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Trade Federation. We renounce all memberships, void all agreements, and terminate all ongoing commitments. Every human citizen, researcher, engineer, doctor, and diplomat will be evacuated from Federation space within 72 hours. High Regent Thylus finally found his voice. You cannot be serious, Ambassador. Humanity depends on galactic trade for survival. Your worlds will starve without our agricultural exports. Your industries will collapse without our raw materials. Your technology will stagnate without access to our research. Elena turned to face him directly. Regent Thylus, in all your centuries of existence, have you ever studied human history? If you had, you would know that humanity has faced extinction dozens of times and survived through adaptation, cooperation, and sheer stubborn refusal to surrender. We explored our solar system before we met you. We built thriving colonies before we joined your federation. We will continue to grow and prosper long after we have left your space. She turned back to address the entire assembly. We take nothing with us that we did not bring. We leave nothing behind that we are not willing to lose. The translation systems will continue to function until their maintenance cycles expire. The medical databases will remain accessible until the security protocols engage. The defense coordination networks will operate until the next scheduled update. After that, you will need to find your own solutions to your own problems. This is madness, shouted Chancellor Varix of the Altrurian Science Council. You would abandon your sworn allies out of wounded pride? Elena's expression softened slightly. Chancellor, some of you have been true friends to humanity. We will remember your kindness, but friendship cannot exist without mutual respect. When you are ready to treat us as equals rather than servants, you know where to find us. Until then, we wish you well in your future endeavors. She turned off the recording system and began to walk toward the exit. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates shouted questions, demands, and threats. But Elena did not look back. She had said everything that needed to be said. Marcus fell into step beside her as they left the assembly hall. How long do you think it will take them to realize we're serious? Elena checked her chronometer. The first crisis will hit within 6 months. They'll start believing we're serious when their solutions don't work. They'll start panicking when they realize why their solutions don't work. And when will they swallow their pride enough to ask for help? Elena paused at the docking bay where the last human transport waited to take them home. Through the viewports, she could see Earth in the distance, blue and green and beautiful against the star-filled void. Some of them will figure it out in time, she said quietly. Others won't. That will be their choice to make. As their ship pulled away from Nexus Station, Elena watched the massive structure recede into the distance. Somewhere behind them, the greatest diplomatic crisis in galactic history was just beginning. But for the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace. Humanity was going home. The galaxy would have to learn to solve its own problems now. Elena hoped they would prove capable of rising to the challenge, but she suspected that the next few years would teach everyone involved some hard lessons about the true value of cooperation, respect, and the particular talents that humans brought to the galactic community. The transport ship oriented itself toward Earth and engaged its faster-than-light drive. Within hours, the last humans would be gone from Federation space, leaving behind a civilization that had forgotten how to function without them. The great experiment in galactic unity was about to face its ultimate test. Elena settled back in her seat and began composing her final report to President Wright. There was much work to be done on Earth, preparing for whatever came next. Humanity's future was uncertain, but it was theirs to determine. After 150 years of serving others, it was time to focus on serving themselves. Behind them, in the corridors of Nexus Station, alien delegates were beginning to realize that the humans hadn't been bluffing after all. The age of human participation in galactic affairs was ending. What would follow remained to be seen. When the helpers disappear, 6 months had passed since humanity's departure from the Galactic Trade Federation, and the first major crisis was unfolding across 3 star systems in the Outer Rim. Dr. Sarah Kim watched the incoming reports from her laboratory on Luna Station, her face growing paler with each update. The crystalline plague had appeared on Altrurian colonies first, then spread to Gorvani mining worlds, and now threatened to reach the core systems where billions of beings lived and worked. Sarah had been the head of galactic disease control for 12 years before humanity's withdrawal. She understood alien biology better than anyone, having developed cures for 17 different plagues that had threatened various species over the past decade. Her research had saved countless lives, and her protocols for interspecies medical cooperation had become the standard across the galaxy. Now she could only watch as those same species struggled to contain a threat they couldn't understand. The plague was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. It started as small crystal formations on the skin that seemed harmless enough, but within days these crystals began to interfere with neural pathways. Victims lost the ability to think clearly, then to move, and finally to breathe. What made it truly terrifying was its ability to jump between completely different biological systems. It affected silicon-based Croxy just as easily as carbon-based Altrurians or energy-based Lumarians. Captain Rex Holloway entered Sarah's lab carrying a fresh batch of intelligence reports. The former Federation military liaison had been reassigned to Earth's new Deep Space Monitoring Division after the withdrawal. His job was to keep track of what was happening in former Federation space without directly interfering. It was a frustrating position for someone who had spent 20 years helping coordinate galactic defense efforts. The situation is getting worse, Rex reported, setting down his tablet. The Altrurian Science Council has lost 3 research stations to the plague. Their best xenobiologists are dead or infected. The Gorvani are trying to quarantine entire worlds, but they don't understand how the plague spreads between different biological systems. Sarah pulled up a holographic display showing the plague's progression across the affected systems. Red zones marked areas where the outbreak was out of control. Yellow zones showed regions under quarantine. The pattern of spread made no sense according to traditional epidemiological models, but Sarah could see the underlying logic that the alien scientists were missing. They're treating it like a normal biological pathogen, she explained, manipulating the display to show transmission vectors. But the crystalline plague doesn't just infect individuals, it infects the quantum fields that life forms use to maintain coherence. That's why it can jump between completely different types of biology. Silicon, carbon, energy, it doesn't matter. Life is life at the quantum level. Rex studied the display with the eye of a military strategist. Can it be stopped? Theoretically, yes, but it would require cooperation between at least 4 different species with completely different approaches to medicine. The Altrurians understand energy-based treatments. The Croxy have expertise in crystal resonance therapy. The Therians know how to manipulate quantum fields in living tissue. And the Lumarians can work directly with pure energy systems. And the problem is? Sarah gestured to another display showing the current Federation response. Look at what they're actually doing. Each species is working independently, using only their own medical traditions. The Altrurians are trying pure energy bombardment, which just makes the crystals grow faster. The Croxy are using resonance frequencies that disrupt the treatment attempts of other species. The Therians are manipulating quantum fields without understanding how that affects energy-based life forms. It's chaos. The communication system in Sarah's lab chimed with an incoming message. The sender ID showed Dr. Kethvar, an Altrurian researcher she had worked with many times during her Federation service. Sarah hesitated before accepting the transmission. Official policy was clear, no assistance to former Federation members, but curiosity won out. Kethvar's energy form appeared as a shimmering humanoid outline filled with swirling light patterns. His usual bright golden color had dimmed to a dull amber, indicating extreme stress among his species. Dr. Kim, he said, his voice carrying the electronic warble of the translation system. I know Earth has withdrawn from galactic affairs, but I must ask for your guidance. The plague is spreading faster than we can contain it. Our treatment methods are not working. Millions are dying. Sarah felt her heart clench. She had worked alongside Kethvar for years, developing new treatments for diseases that threatened multiple species. He was brilliant in his field, but like most aliens, he thought in terms of his own species' biological systems. The collaborative approach that humans took naturally was almost impossible for most galactic species to achieve. Kethvar, I can't provide official assistance, Sarah said carefully, but I can tell you that you're thinking about this wrong. You're treating symptoms instead of causes. The crystals aren't the disease. They're a side effect of quantum field disruption in living systems. The Altrurians' light patterns shifted to deep blue, indicating confusion. But our energy-based treatments should address quantum field disruption directly. Not when you're working alone. You need the Croxy to stabilize the crystal matrices while you work on the energy fields. You need the Therians to provide quantum field manipulation from a biological perspective. And you need the Lumarians to handle the pure energy components of affected systems. Every species brings a piece of the solution, but no single species has all the pieces. The other species refuse to coordinate with us, Kethvar admitted. They claim our methods interfere with their treatments. The research councils cannot agree on protocols. The Gorvani have closed their borders to our medical teams. The Croxy consider our energy-based approach to be primitive superstition. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of millions of lives hanging in the balance. This was exactly what she had feared would happen after humanity's withdrawal. The alien species were incredibly advanced individually, but they had never learned to truly work together without human mediators to bridge the gaps between their different ways of thinking. I'm sorry, Kethvar, I truly am, but this is something your species will have to figure out for yourselves. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah staring at the empty holographic display. Rex placed a hand on her shoulder, understanding her internal struggle. You know that if we get involved, it validates everything they said about us, he said quietly. That we're servants who exist to solve their problems. If we go running back every time they face a crisis, we'll never be seen as equals. Sarah nodded, but it didn't make the decision any easier. How many Federation medical centers have been abandoned since we left? Rex pulled up the relevant files. All of them. Turns out that human doctors weren't just treating patients. They were the only ones capable of coordinating treatment between species with fundamentally different approaches to medicine. Without human oversight, most multi-species medical facilities have shut down due to irreconcilable procedural differences. The scope of the problem was becoming clear to Sarah. Humans hadn't just been participants in galactic medicine, they had been the connecting tissue that allowed different species to work together effectively. Human doctors could think like an energy-based Altrurian when treating energy field disorders, then switch to crystal resonance thinking when working with silicon-based patients, then adapt to bioquantum approaches for carbon-based life forms. This cognitive flexibility was so natural to humans that they had never realized how unique it was. Meanwhile, in the commercial sectors of the galaxy, another crisis was unfolding. The vast trade networks that connected thousands of worlds were breaking down as the translation and coordination systems designed by humans began to fail. Without constant maintenance and updates, the complex algorithms that managed interspecies commerce were producing increasingly erratic results. Commander Zara Okafor received reports about the commercial chaos from her monitoring station on Titan. As the former head of human galactic operations, she had overseen the complex logistics that kept galactic trade flowing smoothly. Now she watched helplessly as the system she had helped build slowly collapsed. The Vorthak are claiming that the Therians cheated them on a shipment of rare metals, her aide reported. But it turns out the translation system miscalculated the exchange rates between their two economic systems. What the Vorthak thought was payment for premium-grade ore was actually payment for industrial waste. Zara shook her head in frustration. The translation system doesn't just convert languages, it converts entire conceptual frameworks. The Vorthak think in terms of absolute material value. The Therians think in terms of utility and scarcity. Without the cultural interpretation protocols, you get exactly this kind of misunderstanding. It gets worse, the aide continued. The Croxy have suspended all trade with energy-based species because they can't figure out how to handle transactions involving non-physical goods. The Lumarians are offering to pay for solid matter with pure energy, but nobody knows how to calculate equivalent values anymore. The human-designed trade system had been a marvel of cultural and economic engineering. It didn't just facilitate the exchange of goods, it translated entire ways of thinking about value, time, quality, and fairness. A Gorvani who thought in terms of geological timescales could negotiate with a short-lived species that needed immediate delivery. A Croxy who valued durability above all else could find common ground with an Altrurian who prized elegance and efficiency. Without human mediators to maintain and interpret these systems, galactic trade was reverting to simple bilateral exchanges between species that could understand each other naturally. The vast multilateral trade networks that had made galactic civilization possible were fragmenting into isolated clusters. But the most dangerous development was occurring in the security sector. The Void Pirates, a loose confederation of raiders from the galaxy's lawless regions, had been mostly contained for decades by the coordinated defense efforts of Federation species. Human military advisors had developed joint tactical doctrines that allowed very different military traditions to work together effectively. Admiral Vex Thule, of the Croxy Defense Forces, was discovering just how difficult coordinated defense could be without human guidance. His crystalline warriors were brave and skilled, but they fought according to rigid geometric formations that had served their species for millennia. The Altrurian energy fighters preferred fluid, adaptive tactics that emphasized speed and precision. The Vorthak military focused on overwhelming force and direct confrontation. In the past, human military advisors would have developed integrated battle plans that used each species' strengths while compensating for their weaknesses. Now, each species fought according to their own traditions, often working against each other even when they were supposed to be allies. The Void Pirates were quick to exploit this weakness. Their latest raids had struck 3 different systems simultaneously, using tactics specifically designed to trigger conflicts between the defending species. They would attack Croxy formations in ways that forced them to request support from Altrurian units, then exploit the confusion when the two species' completely different fighting styles interfered with each other. Back on Earth, President James Wright convened an emergency session of the Security Council to discuss the deteriorating situation in former Federation space. The reports painted a picture of systematic collapse across multiple sectors: medical, commercial, and military. But Earth's official policy remained unchanged: no intervention in galactic affairs. The Federation made their choice, President Wright stated firmly. They decided that humanity was not worthy of equal partnership. We cannot validate their decision by running back to help every time they face a problem they can't solve alone. Secretary of Defense Maria Santos raised a concern that was weighing on everyone's minds. Mr. President, if the Federation collapses completely, the resulting chaos could eventually threaten Earth directly. The Void Pirates are already growing bolder. If they gain control of significant territory, they could pose a threat to our outer colonies. Then we'll defend our own territory, Wright replied. But we will not serve as the galaxy's unpaid problem solvers anymore. If the Federation wants our help, they know what they need to do: formally request assistance as equals and offer appropriate compensation for our services. The president's words carried weight, but everyone in the room knew that the situation was more complicated than simple pride. Humanity had spent 150 years building relationships, developing systems, and creating the infrastructure that held galactic civilization together. Walking away from all of that was painful, even when it was necessary. Dr. Sarah Kim submitted her final report on the crystalline plague to Earth's government that evening. Her conclusion was stark. Without coordinated treatment involving multiple species, the plague would spread throughout the galaxy within 2 years. The death toll could reach into the billions. But stopping it would require exactly the kind of interspecies cooperation that had become impossible without human mediation. As she watched the latest reports from the affected systems, Sarah wondered if the galaxy would find a way to work together before it was too late. The alien species were intelligent and capable, but they had become dependent on human facilitation for any problem that required true cooperation between different ways of thinking. The crystalline plague was spreading, trade networks were failing, and military defenses were crumbling. The galaxy was learning what it meant to lose the invisible infrastructure that humans had provided for so long. The question now was whether they would learn these lessons quickly enough to save themselves. In the depths of space, monitoring stations detected something that made the current crisis seem small by comparison. Ancient signals were stirring in the dark regions beyond the galaxy's edge, drawn by the chaos and conflict that was spreading through former Federation space. Something old and hungry was taking notice of the growing weakness in galactic civilization. The real test was yet to come. Too little, too late. 2 years had passed since humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Trade Federation, and the galaxy was dying. President James Wright stood in the Situation Room beneath the Rocky Mountains, surrounded by displays showing the complete collapse of galactic civilization. Red zones marked dead systems where the crystalline plague had wiped out entire populations. Black zones indicated regions that had gone completely dark, their populations either fled or destroyed. What had once been a thriving community of species was now a collection of isolated, desperate enclaves fighting for survival. The worst news had arrived that morning. Deep space monitoring stations had detected massive energy signatures moving through the void beyond the galaxy's edge. The Harbinger fleet had awakened from its ancient slumber, drawn by the chaos and destruction that now consumed former Federation space. For 10,000 years, these ancient destroyers had waited in the dark between galaxies, feeding on the death of civilizations. Now they were coming home. "Status report," Wright said to the assembled members of his cabinet. Secretary of Defense Maria Santos stepped forward, her face grim. The Harbinger fleet consists of approximately 500 ships, each one the size of a small moon. They're moving slowly but steadily toward the core systems. At their current rate of advance, they'll reach the outer rim of inhabited space in 6 months. What about Federation defenses? Admiral Chen Rodriguez, the former head of Human Galactic Military Affairs, shook his head sadly. "There are no Federation defenses anymore, Mr. President. The coordinated defense network we helped build has completely collapsed. Each species is defending only its own territory, and doing a poor job of it. The Void Pirates now control roughly 30% of former Federation space." Wright studied the tactical displays with growing concern. The Harbinger fleet was an ancient enemy that had destroyed entire galactic civilizations in the past. The only reason they had been defeated before was through the combined efforts of every spacefaring species working in perfect coordination. Without that unity, the galaxy was defenseless. Any word from the Federation leadership? Secretary of State Elena Vasquez nodded. After 2 years of exile, she had been recalled to government service as the situation deteriorated. High Regent Thylas has been sending increasingly desperate messages. The latest one arrived this morning. She activated a holographic display, and the familiar crystalline form of the Zephyrian leader appeared. But this was not the proud, arrogant ruler who had dismissed humanity 2 years ago. Thylas's crystal body was cracked and dim, his voice hollow with defeat. President Wright, the message began, I address you not as High Regent of the Zephyrian Empire, but as a representative of what remains of galactic civilization. We were wrong. We were fools who mistook arrogance for wisdom and independence for strength. Humanity was never our servant. You were our immune system, our nervous system, the connecting tissue that held our civilization together. The recording continued, showing charts and data that painted a picture of complete systemic collapse. The crystalline plague has killed 4 billion beings across 17 systems. Our trade networks have failed, leaving entire worlds without basic supplies. Dr. Sarah Kim found herself back on Nexus Station, working with the same alien scientists who had dismissed her expertise 2 years earlier. The difference in their attitudes was striking. Dr. Kethvar and his colleagues now hung on every word of her instructions, desperate to learn the collaborative techniques that might save their dying civilizations. The key to treating the plague is quantum field synchronization between different biological systems, Sarah explained to the assembled research team. Altrurian energy manipulation, Croxy crystal resonance, Therian bio-quantum field control, and Lumarian pure energy channeling all working in perfect harmony. Each species contributes one part of the solution. The alien scientists nodded eagerly, taking detailed notes. 2 years of watching their people die had taught them humility in ways that centuries of peaceful cooperation never could. Admiral Rodriguez coordinated the military response from the rebuilt command center on Nexus Station. The remaining Federation fleets were a shadow of their former strength, but they still represented formidable firepower if properly coordinated. The challenge was getting dozens of different species with completely different military traditions to work as a unified force. Croxy formations will hold the center, he explained to the assembled fleet commanders. Your crystalline ships can absorb massive damage while maintaining formation integrity. Altrurian energy fighters will provide rapid response and flanking attacks. Vorthak heavy assault units will spearhead direct confrontations with Harbinger ships. Therian bioships will handle search and rescue operations for evacuees. Each species' representatives nodded understanding. They had learned the hard way that their individual approaches to warfare were insufficient against truly dangerous enemies. The first test came sooner than expected. Harbinger scout ships appeared in the outer rim, probing defenses and testing response times. The combined Federation fleet, now under human command, moved to intercept them. The battle was brutal but successful. Human coordination allowed the diverse alien forces to work together seamlessly for the first time in 2 years. Croxy ships absorbed the initial Harbinger assault while Altrurian fighters struck from multiple angles. Vorthak heavy units delivered the killing blows while Therian bioships rescued survivors from damaged vessels. But the victory came at a price. 3 systems had to be evacuated completely, their populations relocated to more defensible worlds. The Harbinger fleet was still coming, and the scouts had provided valuable intelligence about Federation capabilities. As the weeks passed, a pattern emerged. The galaxy was being reorganized into a smaller, more defensible configuration. Outlying systems were abandoned, their populations evacuated to core worlds with better defensive capabilities. Entire species relocated their homeworlds to systems that could be better protected. The old Federation of thousands of worlds was being replaced by a compact alliance of hundreds of heavily fortified systems. Elena Vasquez found herself negotiating the political framework for this new galactic order. The alien species that had once dismissed human diplomatic skills now desperately needed human mediation to resolve the countless disputes that arose during the massive population relocations. The Gorvani want to claim the entire crystalline sector for their evacuated populations, she reported to President Wright during one of their daily briefings. The Therians say that violates their traditional territory claims. The Croxy are demanding compensation for the mining rights they're losing in the abandoned systems, and the Altrurians want guaranteed access to the energy fields they're leaving behind. Solutions? I'm proposing a new territorial organization based on defensive needs rather than historical claims, Elena replied. Species with compatible military doctrines will be grouped together in mutual defense sectors. Trade rights and resource access will be managed through human-administered protocols that ensure fair distribution. The work was exhausting but necessary. Every day brought new crises that required human intervention to resolve. Without human mediation, the evacuation would have collapsed into chaos and civil war. The main Harbinger fleet arrived 6 months later, just as predicted. 500 moon-sized ships emerged from the dark space between galaxies, each one a mobile fortress capable of destroying entire star systems. Their arrival was preceded by a wave of pure terror that affected every sentient mind in the galaxy. Our military forces cannot coordinate effectively against even the most primitive raiders, and now the ancient enemy has returned to finish what our pride began. Thylus's image looked directly at the camera, his crystalline features reflecting genuine humility for the first time in centuries. We formally request Earth's assistance in defending the galaxy against the Harbinger fleet. We offer full restoration of human membership in the Federation with equal voting rights, complete access to all galactic resources, and formal recognition of humanity as the senior partner in any future galactic government. We have nothing left to lose but our lives, and nowhere else to turn. The message ended, leaving the Situation Room in silence. Wright had waited 2 years to hear those words, but now that they had come, the victory felt hollow. Billions were dead, and billions more would die before this crisis ended. What's our assessment of the situation? Wright asked. Dr. Sarah Kim, who had been recalled to serve as special advisor on galactic affairs, stepped forward. Mr. President, the Federation is beyond saving in its current form. The crystalline plague has made entire systems uninhabitable. The economic collapse has destroyed the infrastructure needed to support large populations. Even if we could coordinate an effective defense against the Harbingers, there's not enough left of galactic civilization to be worth saving. But we can save some of it, Sarah continued. The species that have maintained their homeworlds and primary colonies could survive if we can organize an effective evacuation and defense strategy. We're talking about maybe 20% of the pre-crisis population, but that's still several hundred billion lives. Wright turned to Admiral Rodriguez. What would it take to mount a defense against the Harbinger fleet? Everything we have, plus whatever's left of Federation forces, Rodriguez replied. The Harbingers aren't like conventional enemies. They don't just destroy planets, they consume them, converting matter and energy into more ships for their fleet. Every world they take makes them stronger. The key is coordination, added General Patricia Kim, Wright's chief military advisor. Harbinger ships are individually powerful, but their strength comes from their ability to coordinate attacks across multiple systems simultaneously. If we can force them to fight on our terms, breaking up their formations and isolating individual ships, we might have a chance. And that requires complete unity of command across all remaining Federation forces, Rodriguez said. Human strategic doctrine, human coordination protocols, and human officers in charge of all major military operations. The alien species are brave and their individual units are skilled, but they simply cannot work together effectively without human guidance. Wright walked to the observation window that looked out over the Colorado mountains. Earth was beautiful and peaceful, protected by its own defensive fleets and far from the chaos consuming the galaxy. Humanity had built a good life here after their withdrawal. Their colonies were thriving, their technology was advancing rapidly, and their population was growing. They could sit back and let the galaxy burn while building their own separate civilization, but that had never been humanity's way. Draft a response to the Federation, Wright said finally. We'll provide assistance, but there will be conditions. First, formal recognition of Earth as an equal partner with full voting rights in any successor organization. Second, complete reorganization of galactic military forces under human command for the duration of the crisis. Third, establishment of new protocols for interspecies cooperation that recognize human expertise in coordination and mediation. And fourth, Elena asked, reparations. The Federation will compensate Earth for 2 years of economic losses plus the cost of the coming military campaign. We're not doing this out of charity anymore. Within hours, Earth's response was transmitted across the galaxy. The remaining Federation leadership accepted all conditions without negotiation. They had no choice. It was human assistance or extinction. The mobilization began immediately. Human officers who had spent 2 years in exile were recalled to active duty and dispatched to take command of alien fleets that had forgotten how to fight together. Human engineers raced to repair the coordination systems that had been failing since humanity's withdrawal. Human doctors worked around the clock to develop new treatments for the crystalline plague using the multi-species cooperation protocols that only they understood. The final battle lasted 3 weeks and cost the lives of over 100 million defenders. But human coordination made the difference. While the alien species fought with desperate courage, human officers ensured that their sacrifices counted for something. Coordinated attacks struck Harbinger ships at their weak points. Evacuation fleets moved civilians to safety while military forces held the line. Supply chains kept ammunition and medical supplies flowing to the front lines. In the end, the Harbinger fleet was destroyed, but at enormous cost. Half the remaining Federation worlds were uninhabitable ruins. Entire species had been reduced to small populations of refugees. The galaxy that emerged from the crisis was a pale shadow of what had existed before, but it was alive, and it was united under human leadership. President Wright stood once again in the Situation Room, looking at displays that now showed a smaller but more stable galactic civilization. The new Terran Federation consisted of 200 worlds organized around principles of cooperation, mutual respect, and human coordination. "Status report," he said to his assembled advisors. "The crystalline plague has been eradicated," Dr. Sarah Kim reported. "The collaborative treatment protocols are now standard across all member species. Medical cooperation between different biological systems is working better than ever before. Trade networks are stabilizing," added Economic Advisor Martinez. "The new human-administered protocols are preventing the cultural misunderstandings that caused so many problems before." "Military integration is proceeding ahead of schedule," reported Admiral Rodriguez. "The joint training programs are producing combined species units that fight more effectively than any single species force ever could." Wright nodded with satisfaction. "And our former friends in the Federation leadership?" Elena smiled. "High Regent Thylus has formally proposed that the new government be called the Terran Federation, with Earth as the capital and humans holding a permanent majority in the governing council. He says it's only appropriate, given that humans are the only species capable of making galactic civilization work." The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. 2 years ago, humans had been dismissed as primitive servants unworthy of equal treatment. Now they were being asked to serve as the senior partners in galactic government. The aliens had learned, through bitter experience, that some forms of intelligence could not be measured by computational speed or lifespan. Wright approved the new governmental structure, but with modifications. Humans would serve as coordinators and mediators, but all major decisions would still require consensus among member species. The goal was not human dominance, but genuine cooperation based on mutual respect and understanding of each species' unique contributions. As the months passed, the new Terran Federation began to thrive. The concentrated population and resources made for more efficient government and stronger defenses. The smaller size meant that human coordination could reach every corner of the Federation effectively. And the hard lessons learned during the crisis ensured that no species would ever again take for granted the complex web of cooperation that held galactic civilization together. Elena Vasquez returned to her role as chief ambassador, but now she represented the senior partner in a galactic alliance rather than the junior member of an alien organization. The difference was profound, both in terms of respect and responsibility. "We saved them," she told President Wright during their final briefing before she departed for the new galactic capital. "But we also changed them. They understand now that true strength comes from cooperation, not domination. They've learned that intelligence comes in many forms, and that the ability to bring different perspectives together is just as valuable as raw computational power." Wright nodded. "And we learned something too. We don't have to choose between pride and service. We can help others while demanding the respect we deserve. We can be leaders without being rulers." As Elena's ship departed for the stars, Wright reflected on the long journey that had brought humanity to this point. 2 years ago, they had walked away from a galaxy that didn't value their contributions. Now they were returning to lead that same galaxy into a better future. The aliens had been right about one thing. Humanity's short lifespan and emotional decision-making did make them different from longer-lived, more logical species, but they had been wrong about what that difference meant. Humanity's quick thinking and adaptive emotions weren't weaknesses to be managed. They were strengths that made galactic civilization possible. The galaxy was smaller now, but it was also stronger. And at its heart, finally recognized and respected, was the species that had always understood that true intelligence wasn't about being the smartest individual in the room. It was about bringing everyone together to be smarter as a group than any of them could be alone. Humanity had come home to the stars, not as servants or conquerors, but as the teachers and coordinators that galactic civilization needed to survive and thrive. The age of human leadership in galactic affairs had begun, built on a foundation of hard-won respect and mutual understanding. The galaxy would never again forget the value of those who could bring different worlds together in common cause.